Well, hello, everyone. This is Mike DeBoer from the Franchise Business Podcast, and I'm honored to be joined today by someone that I've had the privilege of getting to know in this kind of this franchising world. Him and his wife have been fellow Canadians at a lot of the events that we've been able to go to. So, Jim, first of all, thanks for joining us. I'll let you introduce yourself, tell us and listeners a little bit about who you are, your background, and then what inspired you to kind of get into the role that you're in now, helping people make a decision on their future.
Perfect. Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And I've been in business for, about 39 years now. My wife, who's usually with me on these presentations, couldn't make it today, but we've been married 40 years and 39 of them we've been business partners. And about 16, 17 years ago, my wife and I started looking into the franchise world. We had an insurance business that we sold. We were in our mid 40s. We relocated. Our two daughters were in high school, and we had to get back into business ownership, but we didn't want to reinvent the wheel again. And we were approached by a franchise consultant. I guess we'd kind of found him online.
Sure.
Started working with him, and long story short, we ended up buying our first franchise. It was an education franchise. We were franchisees number 3, so it was an emerging brand. We were unbeknownst to us. We thought it was
on the ground level.
We were ground level when we got in. Probably one of the best decisions we ever made in our life. Our daughters went on to university, and when they graduated, came back home and joined us. So that was kind of like something we didn't expect. So we continued to build that business as a family over the years. And about 7 years ago, by then they were both married and on their own, and they ended up taking over our franchise. So that's been cool. They've been running it now for about 7 years.
Right.
And at that time, we were so involved in the growth of the company that we were approached to become part of their franchise development team.
Okay.
So both Diane and I joined the franchise development team with them. Did that for about 6 years, almost 7 years. Right. It's been a lot of fun. We got involved in this little franchise circle. As crazy as it sounds, there's 4,000 franchises in North America, and it's still a very tight-knit circle, as you well know. That's where we met, and we got to the point in our lives last year where I guess it was time for the next chapter.
Right.
We worked with consultants over 7 years and just loved it, and thought, what a great way for us to give back, to work with people and let them find their dreams. And here we are. Here I am.
Awesome.
I've been doing this now for a little over a year, and just love doing this.
Sure. Awesome. And if you've been on all sort of sides of this world then, Jim, as a franchisee, and then helping people come into the model that you were working in development with, and now as a coach, I'm sure you bring a lot of really unique perspectives for the clients that you work with. So kind of on that note, when you're working with these people that are considering their future and their goals and their dreams, and what is your process for kind of understanding what are your goals, what are your skills, and then financial needs, learning about them before you even start recommending models that they might start considering.
Yeah, and you've kind of just touched on the ball, and typically what we do is on the very first call. It's usually about a 30-minute call. When we're talking to candidates who are potentially looking into business ownership, a lot of them have no idea what they're even looking for, and we understand because we were there. In our case, we ended up buying a franchise that we had said no to. That was the first one they showed us that we weren't even interested in, because we weren't educators, and that was in the education sector. So once one of the first things we want to find out is why, the why. Why are they doing this? What's their background? We get into their skill sets, financial situation, where are they, time frame, and how do they want to do it? Because, is it going to be a full-time? Is it part-time? What we find is a lot of people are looking for something that they can buy into and transition into over time. And then we get into the different types of franchises and so on. So the first call, and it's funny what you can get out of someone in a 30-minute call.
Sure.
Another thing that we bring up in that first call is spousal support.
Right.
More often than not, it's going to be the husband or the wife on that first call. And, as I mentioned, Diane and I don't go buy a pair of jeans without asking her what she thinks, let alone a business.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things we bring up, is your spouse going to be involved? And if so, we want to get them involved on later calls. So yeah, that is very, very important to get as much information as we can on that first call.
Yeah, absolutely. And then at that point, I think, Jim, one of the big benefits that you bring is, like you said, franchising, while it's tight knit, there's a lot of different models. Not all of them are the right fit for any given person. And that can be a really daunting task for somebody to go out and look at all these models on their own without the help of someone like you. So how do you evaluate and vet the models themselves and learn about them, and then, kind of link, okay, do these meet the things that I've learned about my candidate? And then, how do you start referring or recommending those models to your candidates?
Yeah, I remember when I first started doing this, I thought that would be the easy part.
Sure.
But it's not. And we work with our organization. We work with about 700 different brands. So, I mean, that's in probably 27 different sectors. So yeah, we're looking at their track record, their training and support, which is huge. I mean, to me, that's one of the biggest factors when you're looking at a franchise. If you're looking, to buy a franchise because of the name and only the name, turn around, run like your hair's on fire, because that's not what you want. Training, support, financial stability, scalability is another thing. If you're talking to someone who wants to build that little franchise empire, is that franchise model scalable? Can they open numerous locations over time? So, those are just some of the things that we look at. And then, we try to learn as much as we can about those brands. We get presentations, as you well know, we probably meet a couple times a year, and you're updating us on what Schoolie does. And that's very, very important.
For sure. Absolutely. I think the training and education and coaching is you want to be in business for yourself and franchising, but not by yourself. Right. And so that's one of the most important things is support and, infrastructure build out and all the training. So yeah, that's a really good point. Now, Jim, maybe you have never had a challenging candidate. And if so, you're lucky. Maybe you have, though. I always like to kind of ask this question as I'm doing these conversations. Do you have a story, without naming names, if you don't want to do that, about someone that maybe was challenging in terms of, getting their why out of them, or maybe they had some, financial circumstances that, that there was challenges around dealing with that, but you overcame those things and then placed them in a model, and they've been successful in that model ever since. Any story that you're able to share in that context?
Well, it's yes. Yeah. There's actually a gentleman that is in the final stage. He's in the underwriting stage, and he should be approved hopefully today or tomorrow.
Right. That
I started working with March 4th of last year. So this has been literally, we've become best friends over Zoom in the last year. And yeah, I mean, the gentleman, in his, probably my age, he's in his mid 60s, has dreamt of business ownership his whole life. Thought that he was really in really good shape, but his credit took a hit during the pandemic.
Okay.
And really unbeknownst, he really didn't have any idea.
Right.
Credit card debt and where he was at, but just motivated, to get into ownership.
Right.
So it's been, in his case, number one, we knew what the financial requirement was, what he needed, and he was close but not quite there.
Yeah.
But as we got into, we introduced him to funding company. They, kind of worked with him a little bit. We had to get the credit back up. So long story short, we introduced him to a credit recovery company. He worked very closely with them. We had to have his wife on board. So it was, it's been a long journey.
Yeah.
But it just kind of shows that, don't give up. Like a lot of people, and that's one of the things, unfortunately, more often than not, people have no idea, what what it consists of to buy a franchise,
Right.
Financially and so on. And I mean, I'm not going to get into stories because we could be here all day, Mike.
100%. Sure. Yeah.
but that's one that sticks out to me just because he's now at the very end of the process.
Right.
I spoke to their franchise developer yesterday, and he should be approved by as early as today, and that'll be just great.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that points to everyone's situation's different. And you can't have a cookie cutter approach to these are people we're talking about, right?
Yes.
So if they have different circumstances or different, financial things that they need to deal with, or, it's just, we need to meet people where they are and take them through the process and not give up on them if it's not going the way that we want it to or as quickly as we want it to, right? It's on their schedule at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Awesome. So Jim, you kind of pointed to it. I think a lot of people don't really know about this world at all. And again, that's why you're such a valuable asset to them. There's a lot of misconceptions, I think, that people have about business ownership and then, franchising, because you've had such extensive experience and all different facets of this world. What are some of the most common misconceptions that you've heard? And then how have you overcome those and had people start thinking the right way about these things?
Yeah. Well, the biggest one is food, fast food.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody thinks McDonald's, Pizza Hut, Burger King, Dunkin' Donuts. I mean, that's when you think franchises, that's what you're thinking.
Right.
And then that leads to the second part of it, which, is it going to cost me $1 million to buy a franchise? Like, I don't have that kind of money.
Sure.
So that's the biggest thing is to make them understand that, I think we're at the point now where we're less than 20% of the franchises are in the food industry. It's really flip-flopped. And, when you start talking about all these different sectors that are involved in franchising, home-based companies, you can run it from home. You don't need a brick and mortar location because, again, we're used to seeing those Subways, all these franchises that have the big storefronts.
Sure.
And I think that's one of the biggest things is to, just educate them. On the flip side, we often get people who will come to us. Let's say, and a prime example is a laundromat.
Right.
People, and I don't know why a laundromat, but it's even again this year, I probably get at least one a month that says, I think this would be a great business.
Sure.
Not realizing that a laundromat is $750,000 to $1.5 million.
Right.
It is a very big investment. Yeah. So what you got to kind of do is keep them dreaming. Like, let's not get off that, the dream of owning that laundromat, but let's kind of look at things that are more in your budget. So again, it's just educating them on how huge the franchise industry is.
Sure. 100%. And I think it's something that I find sometimes people think they think I want this business, and they're not going to, veer off of that. And again, be open-minded is important. I think also sometimes people think I have a passion or that's my hobby, therefore that's the business I need to get into. And what I think is, no, you should be passionate about building a business, but there's a lot of different avenues that you can, get into to do that. Right. And so it's, passion can sometimes be a tricky thing in this world, right? Finding the right model as well.
Yeah. And I mean, some people think, it has to be their skill set.
Right.
And I go back to our story about the education sector, not being educators and
sure.
buying into, realizing that we were going to be managers.
Right.
We were going to manage tutors. We were going to work with those customer service. It really had nothing to do with education per se. Right. And we see that with trades. People say, I've got no trade skills. Well, you'll have tradesmen work for you. You'll have, you're managing the manager. So there are, so many different opportunities,
sure.
Home-based. What can you run from a home-based business?
Right.
Look at you guys.
Yeah.
It's a prime example of how someone can get into business, with a limited amount of resources and funds.
Right. 100%. Absolutely, Jim. So I know you shared a story, and we could be here all day if we're sharing stories. Is there any other kind of success story about a particular candidate that you worked with and you being able to help them kind of find the right model? Anything else you wanted to share?
Yeah. This just happened not long ago. I was showing a brand to a couple of candidates, a husband and wife team.
Yep.
And we were, and I'd mentioned that I already had, people who had purchased that brand. And it was in the education sector. And it was pretty ironic because they were going into validation. On my follow-up call with them, they mentioned that they had just validated with the couple that I brought in not even a year ago.
Wow, that's cool.
So, I was like kind of in awe. I said, like, really, you've just spoken to, and how did that call go? And they said, just amazing. The couple that they were pretty much in the same, it was just actually in the GTA area.
Right.
That they were familiar with where they were. And they were semi-absentee and they were going to be doing semi-absentee. And just the fact, that they were hearing, a couple who'd been in business less than 10 months. Yeah. That were now at a level where they were exceeding their numbers, just kind of made me really proud,
Sure.
that you brought these people in the business and they were at another level. So right after the call, it was stronger than me. I had to pick up the phone and call the franchisor and say, tell him the story. And I say, by the way, how are they doing? Because I hadn't had a chance to touch base with them. And he said that they were at a whole other level. Wow. And they were already validating. And, they were superstars for this brand. So that is a great feeling. For sure. Of course, you want everyone to succeed. Right. When you hear someone kind of doing it that quickly, it just makes you feel really, really good.
That's kind of why you do it, right? That's your driver, I'm sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome, Jim. Well, I've gone through my questions, but I'll leave the floor open. Anything else that you might want to say to someone that could be watching this and thinking about, hey, I want to take a jump maybe and get into business for myself, but I don't really know what that looks like. Anything else you want to say to that person?
Well, I tell everyone, look, have an open mind. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that happen are, unfortunately, people, are excited. They want to get in business and they don't have the funds. They don't have the funding. They're not there yet. I tell everyone, don't give up. I mean, don't give up on this dream because it's amazing, how many opportunities are out there that you may qualify for that you might think you don't qualify for. So, sure. It's, we had someone yesterday, same thing, single mom, student loan, doesn't have, but it's like, hey, we're going to follow up with you in maybe 6 months from now, like
sure,
putting the money aside and, don't lose hope on that vision. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Don't lose the dream, right?
Exactly. It's all about that dream and seeing people accomplish it. I don't even consider what I do work anymore. This is more of a passion.
Right.
And I couldn't see myself doing anything better than what I'm doing now.
That's awesome. Awesome, Jim. Well, you're great at what you do and you're a great resource to Jim. Well, if someone does want to get in touch with you and kind of, get this process started, where can they find you?
They can just go to our website. It's edgewaterfranchiseconsulting.com. There's a ton of information on there. Our contact information is there, and we'd be happy to talk to you.
Awesome, Jim. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you for doing what you do, and I'm sure I'll see you at a conference somewhere warm soon. So appreciate it, and take care.
Look forward to it, and thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course, sir. Thank you.
Okay, Mike. Take care.